What is the difference between law enforcement and the police? And you may have also heard the justice system. What is the difference between these things? What is one? What is another? Right? And once we got that cleared out of the way, I think we can talk about some of the different levels, like local and sheriff and deputy and warden and all of that stuff. Some of the specific things. Okay, so if you hear the term law enforcement, essentially what that means is the part of the law that is not making it, but making sure that people follow it. And that is a very big umbrella, right? But especially people who are responsible for going out and finding people who are breaking the laws. That might include the FBI. That might include the state police. That might include the game warden, who's responsible for making sure people aren't breaking the law around fishing and things like that. That's all law enforcement. You may have heard of Border Patrol. This is considered law enforcement, which is part of the justice system. Okay, so I'm going to write that down here. So the justice system is an even larger umbrella, and the justice system includes the courts. So the courts are involved in deciding, for example, who goes to jail if somebody gets caught, and the jury in the courtroom hearing the evidence during a trial and making a decision that then goes to the judge to decide a sentence, or maybe they decide that this person is innocent and then they can go free. Regardless, this whole thing is the justice system. And then a smaller sort of branch of that would be law enforcement. And we typically think of law enforcement as the police. Okay, so that's sort of just the maybe the big picture. Not. I don't want to get too detailed at this point, but I'm trying to just go sort of top down. Okay. Now, then you have the different. Let's call them branches of, and we're going to focus specifically on law enforcement, okay? The different branches of law enforcement. You've probably heard about the FBI, and you may or may not have heard about state and local police. So I'm going to write those down as well. We have state police. And then this also may include things like highway patrol. And I'm gonna clarify each of these, but I want to just write them down. Highway patrol. And then you have a local police. Sometimes municipal police, but let's just call them local police, which may include a sheriff. And you may also hear the term deputy. Okay, so let's just talk through some of these things. All right, so the state police is exactly like it sounds. The United States has 50 states, various territories. State police are police whose jurisdiction is the state. Jurisdiction is sort of like the territory that falls under their law enforcement, where they can go to enforce the law, where they can pull people over or arrest people or investigate something, right? This is called jurisdiction. And you may have heard Batman say, I have no jurisdiction. That's right. So he can go anywhere because he's not really part of any police department exactly, kind of maybe. So he has no jurisdiction. If you have a jurisdiction, that is your limits, sort of your border. If you're a state police officer, you are within a certain jurisdiction. Okay, and then this may include highway patrol, which is usually focused on catching people who are speeding. If you get a speeding ticket on a highway, it's that group of the police department, often state police. You'll often see them called state troopers. The individual officers may be called state troopers. And they might pull people over for speeding. They might pull people over because they suspect them of drunk driving. They might pull people over because they suspect them of having drugs. I mean, they can pull you over for any reason, but usually this is the person pulling you over. Okay, and it blends with these, but I just want to sort of give you a sense for this. So these state police or state troopers are on a state level that can go anywhere in the state. That's their jurisdiction. Individually, they may be called troopers or they may be called officers. So police officers, right? Either one of those. For the ones on the highway patrol, usually we would call them troopers. And then when you get to a more local level, they may still be pulling people over, but their jurisdiction is smaller. And if I'm not mistaken, their jurisdiction is sometimes on the town level or the municipal level, or sometimes on the county level. So what's a county? What's the state? What's the town? Well, think of it as, I think, sizes. You could say state is bigger than county. State is bigger than county, and then county is bigger than a township or a municipality. So think of it like that. A local police may be part of a local town, a township, a municipality, and sometimes they may be connected to the county, which is also smaller than the state. Counties vary in sizes, but states have many, many counties. I live in a county called Ulster County in New York State, and if I cross the river, then suddenly I'm in a different county called Dutchess County. And there are police who can be in one or the other. Now, the sheriff it's a leadership position that is elected. So the sheriff is a police officer, but they're more involved in kind of administration. It's a leadership position usually, and they are elected at the county level. I think always, I could be mistaken. If you go back to the cowboy days, a cowboy movie, then you would have the local sheriff. So he would be the sheriff for that little town. It's maybe possible that the sheriff could be on a town level, but I'm pretty sure now sheriffs are elected on the county level. And then a deputy would be a lower level, just as deputy or deputy sheriff. That is just a lower level of police officer. They're doing a lot of the policing, going around checking things out, knocking on people's door if there's a police report or if there's a traffic accident. They're doing a lot of the day-to-day police work. Now, what should you call them? Should you call them deputy? Should you call them trooper? Thank you very much, trooper. I appreciate the ticket. Should you call them officer? Usually what you call them, if you want to be respectful, most of the time, if you don't know what rank they are, you can just say officer. Yes, officer, no, officer, sorry, officer, that's not mine, officer, for example. So those are sort of the most common basic terms. Now, I did bring up then the FBI. The FBI stands for Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is also part of law enforcement, but the FBI has very different jurisdiction. We can say the FBI is kind of elite, and they do a lot more than what you would call basic policing, community policing, traffic tickets, and fights and drugs and things like that. Community policing. They're higher level. You have some people in the FBI who are doing investigation only. They're doing research. They are tracking maybe international criminals. They do stuff beyond the borders of the United States. They have people on the ground, people with guns, but usually for really not extreme cases, but for very serious things. If there's some sort of major drug operation going on and they need 20 people to go in and break it up, it's often going to be, it may be the FBI, and you may have seen that sort of scene in movies, a lot of American movies before. But the FBI is much bigger than that. They have, I'm not sure exactly what their jurisdiction may be. if it's even beyond the United States, but they're involved in so many different things. And the head of the FBI reports directly to the president of the United States. So the president will the president will select the head of the FBI, who's the leader of the FBI, and then they're at the same time doing all kinds of different investigations into everything you can imagine that's against the law, anything that you can imagine that is against the law. So do all FBI officers wear a uniform? No. You see a lot of FBI officers will wear a suit and tie. Maybe they work in an office. They maybe don't even have a gun. I don't know. Whereas when you think of police, you think of a police officer in a uniform. But you then also have a detective and maybe a warden. And I'm just going to put a CSI here as well. So a detective could be a police officer wearing what we would call plain clothes. So they would not wear a uniform, and maybe they're investigating something. Again, you often see it in movies. They might have they do have a badge, but they might be investigating a crime, maybe a murder. Maybe they're investigating something related to drugs, for example. And this is often the stuff that you see in movies, but they're directly connected to the local police department or maybe the state police department. You often see movies related to the NYPD, NYPD, or the, what would be the other one? LAPD. LAPD would be New York Police Department and Los Angeles Police Department. The city police departments within their jurisdiction, the detectives probably not wearing uniforms, wearing regular clothes, plain clothes, investigating various crimes. Okay, and that's, for example, if you watch a TV show called, what is it called? Law and Order. Law and Order. You see a lot of detectives investigating various crimes, doing an investigation. Now, what about a warden? What about CSI? Well, I think this is more closely connected. So CSI would be crime scene investigation, and maybe a person who does it would be a crime scene investigator. I think those people would often potentially be called detectives, but you also have people who are maybe analyzing the blood DNA from a crime scene, and they might be called a crime scene investigator, or maybe they might be a forensic expert. They study hair and things that are left behind at a crime scene. Okay, now a warden usually has a uniform, but it's a different type of uniform. A warden is often connected to fish and game. And game not as in video games or fun games, but game as in animals, hunting animals. So there are rules around fishing and hunting. If you go fishing and you didn't get a fishing license, well, then you can get in trouble. You're probably not going to go to jail for fishing without a fishing license, but they'll give you a fine. I'm not sure what it is here. I've been thinking about going fishing recently, but I don't have a fishing license, so I would need to get that first and then go fishing. Okay, sounds fun. Now, they go around and they make sure people are following the rules. In many states in the United States, we have what's called a deer season or a bow season. Various specific periods of time where you can hunt specific animals. Deer season, you're hunting deer. Now, it's actually a very useful thing because it limits the deer population, and there are so many, especially in the Midwest and the Northeast. It's kind of useful to have, honestly. And so hunters will go out, but they have to follow the rules. They have to wear, for example, a orange on them so they don't get shot by other hunters. They have to have a license for their gun. They can go out only during a specific window. In Ohio, for example, I think it's sometime in November. And the game wardens will just make sure you're following the rules. I'm not sure how severe the punishments are, how severe they can get. But as far as I know, most people are not going to jail for breaking those kinds of laws. Maybe it's more like fines, but I could be wrong about that. Now, the last thing you might be wondering, which I want to quickly talk about, things that people call the police that may or may not be polite, nice, right? So you may have heard a couple of terms. You may have heard cops. You may have heard the fuzz. And you may have heard pigs. Okay. Now, I think probably right away you can see this one and say, all right, well, if someone is calling the police that's going to be only a negative sense. When someone says that, they don't have happy feelings about the police they're talking about. So, you don't want to say, oh, hey, pig, unless you're trying to insult them. And so when people want to be very critical of the police, they will use that term. The fuzz is less common. When I hear this one, I don't think it's particularly rude or disrespectful like this one is. However, it is kind of like we need to escape the law sort of situation. They're here to catch us. Let's get away. So you often see that in movies. When I hear the fuzz, I immediately think of in the 1970s, some guys sitting around smoking weed and the police show up and they say, it's the fuzz, and they run away. This is a kind of collective, uncountable noun, and it defines this. Doesn't matter if there's 6 or 10 or 2, they're here, basically, is the feeling we get from that. And then this, I would say, is more generic. Generic meaning you hear it a lot, and it's kind of on the line. A police officer will say, I'm a cop. So it's not disrespectful or rude. It's just a shortened version of saying I'm a police officer, and it's kind of casual feeling. It's kind of it could be considered friendly. You could say, I know a cop. My cousin is a cop. Are you a cop? But then you get into the territory of that being a negative thing, depending on the situation. In a movie about criminals, they want to find which one the cop is, and when they do, they say, "Are you a cop?" Right? Well, that's a negative thing in their story, right? But on the other side, a police officer will say, "I am a cop." So it's usually nothing like this one, but it could be used in a negative way in some situations. So hopefully, at least, this gives you a broad sense of how we talk about law enforcement. What's the difference between that and the justice system, and where does the FBI fit in? I just want to give you a big picture sense, because you probably see a lot of this in movies and TV shows, and it kind of gets messy. So at least that's the big picture. If you have any other questions about this, just let me know.